Okay, so we can begin to get started. Thank you all for joining us to learn more about psychology at Brandeis. My name is Daisy Culleton, and I am an assistant director at of admissions here at Brandeis. And I am joined by Professor Ellen Wright, who is here to tell us all about psychology here. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Ellen. Before I do so, you'll see that there's a little Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions along the way, about the degree and what psychology looks like, please put that in the chat. And then for the last 10 minutes, we will be going over all of your questions. So without further ado, I will disappear and let Ellen take it away.
Hi there. My name is Ellen Wright, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what Brandeis's psychology department looks like. So I'm going to share my screen because I prepared a PowerPoint. So I want to share that with you and talk to you just a little bit about the Department of Psychology. So hopefully everybody can see my beautiful little slide of the brain. Before I start, let me just introduce myself. So this is my 19th year at Brandeis. I am a clinical psychologist. My training came from the University of Iowa, but I've also run depression prevention projects and study things about emotion regulation and how that relates to depression. So without further ado, and I'm also the undergraduate advising head. So any student that comes to Brandeis that wants to major in psychology has to come through my office to talk about it. All right. So without further ado, I want to talk just a little bit about psychology as a field. This is a fairly standard way that we talk about psychology in the department, with the notion that there's the old story of the set of blind men who encounter an elephant, and depending on where they are, they think it's a spear, they think it's a fan, they think it's a snake, it's a tree, it's a wall, it's a rope. So my original degree is in biology, and I was a science teacher when I decided to shift careers into psychology. And when I told my friends that I was going to study psychology, they all assumed I was going to be a clinical psychologist and see patients. And when I talked about research, they were a little bit puzzled. So I want to make the point that this field, particularly at Brandeis, emphasizes science and the scientific study of behavior. So that can cover a lot of ground, and it's much broader than clinical psychology. We want to make the point that there's a strong scientific and research foundation that can be gotten through studying psychology, and we believe particularly studying psychology through Brandeis. That leads to a wide variety of careers that I can talk about in a minute, but also I think that it prepares people well to be thoughtful and critical thinkers. And so that strong scientific and research foundation hopefully is helping people sort of question assumed wisdom, and to look closer to check and see exactly what they mean. So, as I said, psychology is a really broad field. So I wanted to make the point by sort of laying out some of the different aspects of psychology that might be encountered, some of it in our department, not quite all of it. So many people in our department study psychology with a neuroscience underpinning. So we have people that are studying dementia. We have people who are studying aging and how memory goes and doing neuroscience on it. We have people studying empathy. All of those engage in things that are involved in neuroscience. Psychology also involves developmental psychology, and that can be more of the standard sort of childhood and adolescence, but also reflects later life focus. And so we have several people that study developmental processes that unfold from young adulthood all the way into old age. It also includes social psychology, cognitive psychology, cultural psychology. So one of our faculty members is actually a cross-cultural researcher in the area of memory, and her students and she study not only memory phenomena and concepts of self in the United States, but also in Taiwan, in China, in Turkey, and a variety of other places. We have an interest in health psychology and the ways in which how psychology can inform health behaviors as well as health outcomes. connected to the business and the marketing area. We have industrial and organizational psychology, and closely connected to that, human factors, which is involved in understanding the ways in which sensory and motor perception can play a role in the kinds of setups that we have in various kinds of business and industry. We have the sort of the standard thing that people think about when they think about psychology: clinical psychology, counseling psychology, social work is in there a little, although social work has a little bit of a slightly different feature to it. Forensic psychology. Many of our students end up with a real strong interest in things that relate to understanding why people commit crimes, or how we can use psychology to help us do better with the judicial system. There's a whole field of rehabilitation psychology, sports psychology. Brandeis has some great sports people, and from time to time, I get students who want to study sports psychology. Quantitative psychology, also a really important aspect, and quantitative psychology really reflects sort of uncovering new ways of using statistics to figure out things. There are close connections between our environmental studies program and climate and environmental psychology here. And there's also, psychology of teaching and psychology of learning. So just as an illustration of the kinds of careers that one can have, if you look at some of these pictures, anywhere from social work to clinical work to the business world to a little bit of dentistry. This picture is actually of a faculty member who's retiring this next year, Stuart Altman, who's world famous in health policy, and there's connections with that. You have law, you have health, you have just plain old research in a wide variety of places. I wanted also to introduce you to our faculty. So I did a sort of a round robin that was mostly alphabetical, and I will point out some important people. And Barry is becoming very famous in the area of dementia and does a lot of neurochemistry and cognition. Anna Clark is the other clinical psychologist on faculty. Paul Dizio does human spatial orientation, and that also includes work with Jim Lackner. We have James Howard, who joined us from a neuroscience program and studies the role of reward and dopamine on different kinds of decision-making. We have Shantanu Jadhav doing learning, memory, and decision-making. Actually, Shantanu and Don Katz, who's next to him, are the two people who are doing more animal-based psychology right now. Margie Lockman, pretty famous in the area of old life and aging. Marissa, who studies empathy. I wanted to point out also our chair, Angela Getches. She's the one I mentioned who does a lot of sort of culture and cognition. She's our chair, our current chair. In addition, we have Jennifer Getches, who is our director of graduate studies, as well as the person who does a lot of research around social interaction and motivation. Brandeis also has a master's program and a PhD program. The master's program is headed by Xiaodong Liu. We also have Teresa Mitchell, who does more sort of cognitive neuroscience, Bob Sekuler, who looks at perception and cognition, Sarah Lupus, who does stress and health, and Hannah Snyder, who does information around developmental psychopathology and cognitive neuroscience. So you can see we have a wide variety of people. We're a pretty small department. That means that the course coverage is really specific to our own research interests too. All right, so what does the major look like? If there's anybody who can talk about the major, it's me. So there's a lot of flexibility in the major. It's probably one of the more flexible majors, which is why psychology is often combined with other majors. So everybody has to either take Intro to Psychology or provide AP or IB credit for it. To cover the neuroscience side or the cognitive neuropsych side of things, students have to take 2 courses at least from a selection of things that reflect perception, cognition, and just plain old neuroscience classes. They also have to take 2 courses from the developmental, social, and clinical side of things. So those are survey classes. They're slightly bigger classes, but give our students a really well-rounded experience. We push very heavily around our students, making sure they get a really good basis in statistics and also in research methods. And unlike some of the departments in the School of Sciences, which is where we are also, our research methods contains the lab, so there's not a separate lab meeting. There is just an extra 40 minutes every week that's spent on doing lab work. Students also have to take 2 upper level seminars, and they can be any of the ones that Brandeis and the psychology department will support. Often some of the other majors have cross-listed classes that can count for one of them. In addition, because psychology is a research science, we ask that students take an additional research science course, but that can also be done through one of the seminars. And finally, for the major, there's a residency requirement, which means that you have a certain number of courses you have to take that is within the department. All right. Let's see. So the structure also includes other complications. So Brandeis asks us to make sure that each major, let's say that a student has 2 majors. In each of those majors, they have to take courses in digital literacy, writing intensive courses, quantitative literacy, and oral communications. Most of those are taken care of relatively easily, and we have a number of seminars and one survey level class that fulfills the oral communications program. The class sizes really vary, so it depends on sort of the funnel setup. So intro is usually pretty big, somewhere between 150 and 200 students. The survey level classes can range anywhere from about 45 to 100. I'm currently teaching a class in psychopathology that's got 107. It's one of my bigger ones. And then our upper level seminars are anywhere from 12 to 30. The minor is a little bit less complicated, but has a requirement of 4 of the 5 classes that count needing to be in the department. So what are the common combinations? So we have really close ties to a number of different departments in the university, and a lot of our students double major in psych and in HSSP, which stands for Health, Science, Society, and Policy. A lot of students who are doing that are interested in getting into social policy, but want to have a bent towards mental health. Many of our students now are double majoring in neuroscience and psychology. A number of them in education and psychology, and a ton of students use psychology as either a major or a minor for business or for econ and marketing, because there's such a close connection between what we know in psychology, particularly in the area of social psychology, and how that plays out in the business world. We have a number of students who are interested in going on into law, and so there's a legal studies course of study that students will often combine with psychology. Linguistics, which is at least used to be part of the department, but is still like a separate major, often is connected there, and that's often connected with what we know about development, particularly in childhood. And then also women and gender studies. So for instance, one of the classes that I teach is an upper level research seminar that looks at gender differences and what we know about the research that bears on gender differences. And so that's often a course that students will take for both majors. So what do we have? We have graduate programs in psychology also. So we have an MA program, unlike neuroscience, where there's a sort of just a 5-year program with 4 years of bachelor's and then 1 year of master's. Our master's program is separate. So it's technically a 1-year program, but can be done in 2 years. So students often will try and do the master's, but do it part-time and then spread it out over 2 years. We also offer a doctorate in psychology, and that doctorate in psychology is considered to be a general PhD, but offers a lot of opportunities to concentrate in a particular area of research that they're interested in. And as I said, it's really important to remember that neuroscience and psychology are really totally connected. Just about all of our faculty right now are faculty in both programs, in neuroscience and also in psychology. All right, so what can you do? Is there a career? That's almost always one of the first questions I get asked in my office when somebody's declaring is, well, can I do anything with an undergraduate degree? And the answer is, of course, yes, absolutely. So You can do something with undergraduate degrees. You can do something with getting into a graduate level. So you'll notice that I've noted a lot of different things. So that would include research science in any of the fields that you can think of, developmental, social, neuroscience, any of those. So doing the science in institutes and in companies and things like that is often one of the areas where you can get jobs. Particularly people who have gotten degrees in psychology who focused on social psych and business or marketing or econ often end up consulting to companies and manufacturers, and that can look really different depending on what you're doing. That includes a lot of our students who have finished their doctorate at Brandeis but didn't want to go on into academia. Obviously, getting a degree in psychology can be helpful in terms of teaching. So a lot of students will use, if they're combining their psychology with education, will teach psychology, but also on a graduate level. And you can think of that combined with interest in counseling. And so you can see people that become admissions counselors or academic services counselors, that kind of thing. I used to sit, I'm not anymore. It was getting to be too much. I used to sit on the pre-health board. And so I know that a lot of students who are pre-health or pre-medicine are also psych majors or psych minors. And so a lot of psychology will help prepare people for being an intern or being a psychiatrist or a neurologist or a pediatrician or a lot of other things because there's an application there. Other healthcare professionals, being a dentist, a dietitian, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a veterinarian, yes, even a veterinarian. I've written letters of recommendation for psych majors for all of those programs. And again, I mentioned the idea of health policy. Health policy is very carefully and closely connected to psychology. There's the obvious therapy, and that can look like clinical psychology, but can mean that a student is applying to social work programs or to master's level licensing programs in counseling. Assessment is the special purview of clinical psychologists. So that's one of those things that if you're really interested in neuropsych testing or intelligence testing or any of those kinds of things, a career in psychology is good. I had mentioned forensic psychology. So the FBI is something that I've written letters of recommendation for. Being a statistical consultant, going into law, being a coach, being a sports psychologist, all of these things are potential fields for students who are in psychology. So when they were prepping me for doing this, they wanted me to talk about what's my favorite thing. And I have to tell you that when I was very young, I wanted to be Julie Andrews. As you can see, I did not turn into Julie Andrews, but when I was thinking over what are my favorite things, the very first thing that always pops into mind is my interactions with the students. We have really smart and engaged students, and being able to help them, being able to learn from them, that's really what gives me a lot of energy every day. I also love, this is not the first university I've taught at, I taught at several others, and I love being at a university where they're doing cutting edge research. And that happens both in our department and also the presentations that we get from various people who come through and do easy for me to say, colloquia. I've taught too much today. Collaborating with the other faculty. I love advising, and I've been a teacher since, well, can't even tell you, since 1979. So I love teaching. One of the things that I know students are often asking me about is the kinds of things that they can do, the kinds of experiences that they are offered. So first, in terms of declaring, it's a relatively simple process. There's a website with a checklist and a worksheet that gets mailed to me. Students come to office hours. I talk to them about what they're interested in, and then I try and make sure that they can get advised to take the classes that will be the most helpful for them. There's also a lot of experiential things that students can do, engaging in the research with the faculty that are doing work here. Doing study abroad programs. There are a lot of study abroad programs that Brandeis is connected to that are connected to psychology. And then there are doing internships, and some of those are course-based, but some of them are just out in the world finding an internship so you get clinical and research-orientated experience. So, and I think I'm almost out of time. I wanted to give you a few examples really fast of some of the labs. I only could grab pictures from a few places. So this is actually the lab of Dr. Dizio and Lochner, and you can see that they're doing spatial orientation things. That's being funded by NSF and NASA. This one is Angela Gutches's lab, which studies aging, culture, and cognition. This is Professor Gutzel's lab that looks on motivation and social biases. This is James Howard's lab, which looks really specifically at motivations to approach and dopamine. And I think that's it. And I think I just ran out of time, so that was perfect. Yep, you're muted.
Thank you, Ellen. That was actually perfect timing, so thank you. We have some questions in the chat, some really great questions. Some of them is about research, so thank you for showing us all the different research opportunities. Can you explain to us how accessible research is and how you can actually get those different kinds of opportunities?
Sure thing. So on our website, on the psych website, is a section that says research. Each of the faculty that have research going on have a connection that talks not only about what they're doing, but how you can get involved. So our lab, we are a small department considering how popular the major is. So, our labs, everybody wants to get research experience, but so we try as hard as we can to make sure that people get the opportunity to do so. But there are links that make it really easy to at least find out how to get involved and to find out exactly what people are doing. Does that cover it?
Yes, thank you. We also had a question saying, how would I go about doing research in psychology as a career as opposed to clinical psychology?
So my first suggestion would be if you're really interested in doing research, you should try and take research methods as early as possible so you get a good background in that and work in a lab. A lot of students who want to go on to higher education, so PhD programs and that kind of stuff, often start with being in a lab, doing research in the lab, and then taking a research job afterwards. So not surprisingly, because of where we are, we're situated in Boston where there's lots and lots of research going on. There are a lot of opportunities to connect with people, and the faculty are pretty well connected, particularly locally, but in major city centers like New York and Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and other places like that, there are usually an abundance of research jobs where they're looking for people who want to work and get more research experience and see if that is the kind of career for them.
Thank you. So you were able to share with us all the incredible faculty members that are a part of the psych department. But how do you actually get to work with those faculty members and really pick their brains and hop onto the research and just really learn more about all of their knowledge?
So, as I said, there are links to each of the labs. So usually my advice when somebody's asking me, how can you do this? How can you get on board with that? One is take their classes, because that gives you an opportunity to get to know them and spend time in office hours. But also there's a connection with each of the labs with the research that they've been publishing. And so usually what I tell them, particularly if they're wanting to get in a very popular lab, is that they should read the research that the faculty member has done lately so that they can talk intelligently about it and so they can really know whether or not that's something they want to do.
Going off of that, we have another question about ways that psych majors can get involved in the community. And I'm going to interpret that both in the sense of the Brandeis community as well as opportunities within the local Boston area and Boston itself.
So probably if people are interested in Brandeis, they have some knowledge of the fact that Brandeis as a whole has a lot of involvement in the Waltham community. And so there are opportunities for internships and experience working in that community, as well as within the sort of the more sciencey community. There are, because again, we are in an area that has a lot of hospitals and a lot of different elements. There are lots of opportunities for internships. that give you experiential, oops, I can't say experiential experience. Sorry about that. They give you a lot of experience. So those kinds of places can be more clinical, they can be more educational, or they can be more researchy. So for instance, Children's Hospital, there's a branch of Children's Hospital in Waltham. And a lot of the students that I've supervised over the years have done research internships there. So, and there are a lot of ways of finding out about that. Sometimes the administration in our department can share that kind of information. Also, the Hyatt Career Center will often send out information about how to get involved in those things.
Great. There's so many questions, so I'm trying to field all of them while slightly combining some of them. Some questions that we're getting is that there are clearly lots of different branches and specialties within the psych major. So are those different majors? When do you need to declare a major? Can you just tell us a little bit more about that
Yeah.
process?
Yeah, so there's only really a major in psychology, and a question that we often get asked, so I'll just throw this in for free. We don't have a BS. Neuroscience has a BA and a BS. We only have a BA right now. We've been talking about doing it, but we're a little bit low on faculty right now. So there's just a major, and how that looks on your transcripts and how that prepares you for the future depends on whether you're going to be smart about the kinds of classes that you take that sort of are focused in your area. So having said that, Brandeis requires that students declare their first major by the middle of their second semester sophomore year. So you can declare all the way up through your senior year if you've already declared something else or you want to change your major or whatever, but you have to have declared something by then. And that matters a lot to a lot of our students because a lot of them do study abroad experiences. And so that study abroad experience means that they want often to count some of those classes towards the major, and you cannot count them towards the major unless you've actually declared the major. So there are little tricks and ins and outs about the declaration process that are important.
Thank you. All right. So with the mindset that we have 2 minutes left, there's one question I think I'm going to broaden it that I think would be really interesting to end on. So, Ellen, in your experience, what do you think are some common traits that you observe in Brandeis students, whether that be how they are in the classroom, their involvements that make them really successful in the major, as well as in their potential futures?
You're asking specifically about what it takes to be successful, right? As a piece of that. Okay. So just needed to clarify. So I think that shown up to class, I know this is a generation that's experienced COVID, and so class attendance and illness and that kind of thing get more complicated, but showing up and attending to listening to what's going on, getting into the reading, getting into talking about it with your friends. Those are all things that increase your own enthusiasm, as well as make it more likely to help you connect with the faculty that you are. I mean, we're a wide variety of personalities as faculty, so we have different standards and things like that. But in the end of the day, it's important to show up and to get curious. So my best students are the ones that are curious, that ask like off the wall questions that I haven't considered, or offer information that they have that I might not. And so those are all, for me, things that I look for that make my experience better and hopefully make their experience at Brandeis more successful too. There's a common misconception. I want to make sure I say this. There's a common misconception that you have to come in knowing what you're going to do, and that every Brandeis major is majoring in 3 things and minoring in 2 things and involved in like 15 different service occupations. I think it's important also to have fun in school. I mean, life's short. You want to have a really good connection with friends as well as with faculty.
Thank you. Those characteristics make for a very nurturing yet welcoming learning environment. So thank you for sharing. You all
Mhm.
have some wonderful questions. I'm sure, sorry we could not answer all of those, but I do encourage you to look over the psychology website or section within the Brandeis website, just so you can learn about the different research labs, internship opportunities you can take advantage of. And it also lists out all of the faculty members within the department. So if you have any specific questions, you can always ask those faculty members. If you have further questions, you can also email us at admissions@brandeis.edu. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you, Ellen, and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so